Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today into the world of Charlemagne.
Charlemagne.
Oh, he's a big one, isn't he?
He is, yeah, hugely important.
Charlemagne the Great, as he's so often called.
Right.
But we're going to try to get beyond that label, beyond the myths and legends.
Absolutely.
Really trying to understand the man and the times he lived in.
Yes.
To help us along, we've got some excerpts from an article simply titled Charlemagne.
Straight to the point.
Right. No messing around.
Just Charlemagne.
So where do we even begin with a figure like this?
Well, it's fascinating because we don't even know for sure when or where he was born.
Oh, really?
Most scholars put it around 748 AD, but some argue for as early as 742.
Okay.
And his birthplace. Completely unknown.
Wow. It's like he just appeared out of thin air.
It's true, almost like he emerged from the fog of history, ready to conquer.
Maybe that missing origin story fueled his ambition.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he had something to prove.
Right, like he needed to make his own mark on the world. To truly grasp his rise, though, you have to understand the political landscape he was born into.
Right.
We're talking about the Frankish kingdom, ruled by the Merovingian dynasty, at least in name.
In name only, though, really.
So they were figureheads.
Pretty much.
Who held the real power then?
The mayors of the palace.
Ah, okay, I've heard of them.
Like Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel.
The one who stopped the Muslim advance at Tours.
Exactly, the Battle of Tours.
So Charlemagne came from a family that knew how to wield power.
They did.
It was in his blood.
Absolutely. And his father, Pepin the Short.
Pepin the Short.
Yeah.
Do you think he ever got tired of that nickname?
I imagine so.
But he didn't let it hold him back.
Not at all.
Clearly.
He took that power play even further.
Oh. What does he do?
Deposed the last Merovingian king and crowned himself king.
Wow, talk about a bold move.
Yeah, real game changer.
So the kingdom passed to Charlemagne and his brother, Carloman, after Pepin died.
That's right, in 768.
Talk about inheriting a complicated situation.
Right. Internal conflicts brewing, external threats looming.
Not exactly a recipe for a peaceful co-rulership.
Not at all.
So how did that brotherly dynamic play out?
It was, well, complicated.
Yeah.
There was this ongoing uprising in Aquitaine.
Aquitaine, wasn't that a region that always seemed to be rebelling?
It was.
Even centuries later with Eleanor of Aquitaine?
You're exactly right.
So what happened with the brothers in this Aquitaine situation?
Charlemagne took charge there, leading the Frankish forces.
And Carloman?
Strangely absent from the action.
Interesting. Maybe he just didn't want to get his hands dirty.
Perhaps, or maybe he had other things in mind.
Okay, now I'm intrigued.
Well, just a few years later, Carloman dies.
No.
Leaving Charlemagne the sole ruler.
That's convenient.
Isn't it?
So was it suspicious?
The sources don't say definitively,
Right.
but what is clear is that Charlemagne consolidated his power swiftly.
By absorbing his brother's territories.
Yes, and he even forced Carloman's family to flee.
Wow, that's cold.
It-
He clearly wasn't messing around.
Not at all.
So he's king, but there's this thing about his education.
Or lack thereof.
Yeah, it's surprising considering he was this huge proponent of learning.
The driving force behind the Carolingian Renaissance.
Exactly, a period of incredible intellectual revival.
It is one of the great historical paradoxes. We don't have solid evidence of formal schooling for him.
But he championed learning so fiercely.
He did.
Fascinating.
It really makes you wonder.
What drove him?
What sparked that passion for knowledge?
Maybe he realized the power of knowledge, having clawed his way to the top.
It's possible.
Or maybe it was a way to compensate for what he felt he lacked.
That's another intriguing theory.
Yeah, the psychology of it all.
It's fascinating to consider.
But let's not get too sidetracked.
Right.
We've got Charlemagne, king of the Franks.
A king with ambition.
And he wasn't content to just sit on that throne, was he?
Not at all.
He had bigger plans.
Much bigger plans.
This is where things get really interesting.
It-
Okay, so we've got Charlemagne, king of the Franks, and clearly a man on the move. But where does he set his sights first?
Well, one of his early targets was the Lombards in northern Italy.
The Lombards. Weren't they always causing trouble?
They had a long history of it. They'd even sacked Rome a few centuries earlier.
Not exactly the best neighbors then.
No, not really. And by Charlemagne's time, they were clashing with the Pope.
Oh, that's never a good idea.
Especially not when the Pope is a close ally of the Franks. Charlemagne's own father, Pepin, had intervened on the Pope's behalf before.
So Charlemagne was stepping into a pre-existing power struggle. Interesting. Protecting the Pope was important, but I wonder, were there any other factors at play?
Well, remember Carloman's family, the ones Charlemagne forced to flee.
Right.
They had sought refuge at the Lombard court.
Ah, so it wasn't just about defending the Pope, it was personal too.
It's certainly possible. Having his nephews under the wing of a potential rival couldn't have sat well with Charlemagne.
Eliminating threats seems to have been a bit of a pattern with him, wouldn't you say?
It does appear that way. Anyway, the Lombard king started making moves on papal territory. Pope Adrian I sent out a desperate plea for help.
And Charlemagne saw his opportunity.
Exactly. A chance to neutralize a threat and expand his power at the same time.
2 birds with 1 stone.
Precisely. He marched his army across the Alps and laid siege to Pavia, the Lombard capital.
And Pavia fell.
It did, after a long and hard-fought campaign. The Lombard king was deposed, and Charlemagne added King of the Lombards to his growing list of titles.
Talk about an empire builder. But he wasn't done yet, was he? He still had those Saxons to deal with on his eastern border.
Ah, yes, the Saxons. They were a persistent thorn in his side. They resisted his attempts to conquer and convert them.
That doesn't sound like an easy fight.
It wasn't. The Saxon Wars raged on for decades, and they were brutal.
Brutal how?
Well, there's one particularly chilling episode, the Massacre of Verdun.
I've heard of that, but remind me.
Thousands of Saxon prisoners were executed.
That's horrific. It really makes you question the whole greatness thing, doesn't it?
It does make you wonder. It's a reminder that even figures hailed as great are capable of terrible things.
So Charlemagne, the warrior king, with a very dark side. But he wasn't just about brute force, right? He was a shrewd diplomat as well.
Absolutely. He understood the importance of alliances. He forged connections with rulers across Europe, even tried to arrange a marriage between his daughter and the son of the Byzantine empress.
The Byzantine Empire.
Yeah.
Those remnants of the Roman Empire in the East, I'm sensing some tension there.
You'd be right. They saw themselves as the true heirs of Rome.
So they weren't too happy about this Frankish king calling himself an emperor.
Not one bit. And that brings us to that pivotal moment in 800 AD, Charlemagne's coronation as Emperor of the Romans.
Pope Leo III on Christmas Day, right there in St. Peter's Basilica. Talk about a dramatic entrance.
It was quite a spectacle, and it's been the subject of much debate among historians.
Oh, what do they say?
Well, some argue that Charlemagne orchestrated the whole thing, that it was a calculated move to legitimize his power and position himself as the successor to the Roman emperors.
So kind of a power grab?
Some would say so, but others believe he was genuinely surprised, maybe even reluctant at first.
Really? But he was already acting like an emperor in many ways, wasn't he?
That's a good point. Perhaps it was just a matter of making it official.
And wasn't the Byzantine Empire in a bit of turmoil at the time? With a female empress on the throne?
You're right. There may have been a power vacuum that Charlemagne and the Pope were eager to fill.
This whole coronation really throws a wrench into the 2 emperors problem, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Suddenly there's a new kid on the block claiming the mantle of Rome.
I can't imagine the Byzantines were too happy about that.
Oh, they were furious. It created a rift that would have lasting consequences for Europe. But Charlemagne was more than just a conqueror and emperor. He was a reformer, too, deeply invested in strengthening his realm from within. And this might sound funny, but it illustrates the point perfectly. Charlemagne received an elephant as a gift.
An elephant? Who gifts an elephant?
Harun al-Rashid, the Abbasid Caliph.
Wow. Talk about an exotic present.
It speaks to the complex web of relationships Charlemagne cultivated. Don't forget, this was a time of immense religious and political upheaval. Charlemagne found himself navigating controversies like the adoptionism debate in the Spanish church.
So he wasn't just fighting wars, he was shaping the religious landscape of his empire.
Exactly. He was trying to create a unified Christian society. And that leads us to his efforts to centralize authority, reform administration, and foster education.
His vision went far beyond military conquest. He was building a legacy that would resonate for centuries. All right, so Charlemagne's an emperor now. He's got this massive, diverse territory to manage. An elephant gift from a caliph is cool and all but cult. I'm guessing ruling an empire takes a bit more than exotic animal diplomacy.
Got a bit more, yeah.
So how did he keep it all from falling apart? How did he even manage it all?
Well, he had a pretty multifaceted approach. He knew military strength was only part of it.
Sure.
To really solidify his rule, he needed a strong administration.
Right, to keep things running smoothly.
Exactly. And he couldn't be everywhere at once.
Not even Charlemagne.
So he revived this old institution, the Missi Dominici.
Okay, the Missi Dominici. Remind me, what were they again?
Think of them as like imperial inspectors.
Ah.
Charlemagne would handpick these trusted officials, send them out all over the empire.
To do what?
Make sure his laws were being followed, oversee the local officials.
Keep everyone in line?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
They were like the glue that held the empire together.
It's interesting. He was taking these old Roman ideas about governance and making them work for him.
Very much so. Charlemagne was a real blend of innovator and pragmatist.
Yeah, he had to be.
But beyond just keeping order, he really wanted to create this unified Christian society.
That was his vision.
It was, and that's where his passion for education comes in.
Right. The Carolingian Renaissance.
Exactly. Even though he maybe didn't have much formal education himself.
It's almost ironic.
It is, isn't it? But he was the driving force behind this huge intellectual revival.
And he had his team of scholars to help him.
His brain trust, yeah.
What were some of their biggest accomplishments?
Oh, so many. They standardized Latin, made it the language for scholarship and administration.
Throughout the empire?
They developed a new script, the Carolingian minuscule.
Okay.
Which was clear, legible, easier to copy.
It's amazing how much that script influenced writing, even today.
I know, right? It has such a lasting legacy.
And they saved so many ancient texts.
They did. Painstakingly copied and preserved them.
Without them, so much knowledge could have been lost.
Absolutely.
It's an incredible legacy.
It is. Charlemagne's reign, it wasn't just about conquering. It was about cultivating minds, fostering knowledge, shaping a culture.
He knew that real power wasn't just about military might.
It was about controlling the narrative.
And even controlling how people wrote.
In a way, yeah.
So we have Charlemagne, the warrior king, but also Charlemagne, the scholar, the reformer, the empire builder.
He was such a complex figure.
And his story, it's a lot more than just that simple image of a conqueror.
Absolutely. History's never simple.
It's always messier than that.
And Charlemagne's story, it's full of contradictions, complexities, nuances.
Right.
Was he a visionary leader who brought order and enlightenment to Europe?
Or was he a brutal tyrant who built his empire on violence?
It's easy to fall into those good guy, bad guy traps.
Yeah, the truth is always more complicated.
And that's what makes studying history so fascinating.
It does.
We have to grapple with these ambiguities, these figures who defy easy categorization.
And what about Charlemagne? What's your take on his legacy?
Well, ultimately, it's up to each of us to weigh the evidence, consider the different perspectives.
To come to our own conclusion.
Exactly. Was his reign truly our Renaissance? Or was it something else, something more complicated?
It's a question worth thinking about.
It is.
A perfect note to end our deep dive into the world of Charlemagne.
It's been a fascinating journey.
Thanks to everyone for joining us today. We hope this has left you with some new insights into Charlemagne, his life, and his times.
And we hope it sparks your curiosity to explore further.
Until next time.